Tonight, we step quietly into the gilded belly of Versailles, where chandeliers drip crystal and secrets curl tighter than powdered wigs. You're not a duke, not a chevalier, not even a valet. You're something stranger, slipperier, a barber in the court of the Sun King. That's right, Louis XIV. And while your hands wield shears and razors, your true tools are nerve, timing, and a saint's patience. Because behind every flawless bouffant lies a war waged in silence, sweat, and scented powder. The mirrored salon glints with light before dawn, and already your fingers ache. You haven't slept much, not since the Duchesse de Polignac's poof collapsed mid-curtsy last week, and you took the fall. You're still on probation. One more mistake, and you'll be demoted to chamber pot detail. Again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're tuning in from tonight and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this little community of night owls reaches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull your apron tight, a soft linen wrap, embroidered just faintly with your mark, an ivy leaf curling around a comb. It sets you apart from the others, the clumsy fops who only got the job through family names. You earned it. Cutting street hair near the Rue Saint-Honoré, learning on restless scalps and knife-wielding drunkards. Now, your clients wear ermine and sip chocolate while you tremble near their ears. You pass down the corridor, through a hall of sighing portraits, and enter the royal salon. Everything smells like beeswax and ambition. Rows of oils line the counter: cedarwood, bergamot, patchouli. A risky blend. Too much patchouli, and you risk offending the king's nose. He once banished a chamberlain for wearing a cologne that reminded him of wet parchment. No pressure. Your instruments await you on a silver tray. Bone-handled scissors, sharpened to a whisper. A tortoiseshell comb with a tooth missing, your lucky charm. And the razor, gleaming, precise, and deadly in more ways than one. You once saw another barber nick the Comte d'Artois' neck. The man bled for 10 seconds. The barber was never seen again. Rumor has it he trims wigs in the Bastille now, blindfolded. Your assistant, Leon, enters with the morning basin. He's 12 and cocky, with ink stains on his sleeves and dreams of courtly glory. They're running late, he whispers. The Dauphin fainted in fencing. You nod. That buys you 7 minutes. You use them to rehearse your pleasantries and trim the wax from your mustache. Image matters. You are expected to exude grace, humility, and absolute loyalty, all while praying nobody sneezes mid-curl. This morning, it's the king himself. His valet opens the door with the ceremonial knock. 3 soft taps, 1 long pause, and a flourish like a dying pigeon. You bow, lower than your spine prefers, and greet His Majesty with a smile polished overnight. Louis seats himself wordlessly, gazing into the mirror. You don't speak until he does. That's rule 1. Even if he has spinach in his teeth, even if he has a bat nesting in his wig, still, you wait. He says nothing. You begin. The king's hair is, well, let's call it nostalgic. He still wears the lion's mane of his youth, or at least the illusion of it, now constructed from human, horse, and sometimes goat hair, depending on the humidity. You gently unpin it, layer by layer, like peeling back history. Underneath, his scalp is pink, spotted, and flaking. Too much powder, too little washing. You suppress a sneeze. With soft strokes, you begin the ritual. Dusting, oiling, reshaping. The silence stretches. Occasionally, he grunts. You murmur approvingly, regardless of whether it was a pleased grunt or a digestive one. Très royal, Your Majesty. You fluff the back just so. He hates looking bald from behind. One false move, and you'll be the talk of the court, not in a good way. Remember last spring? The infamous swan neck disaster. A rival barber dared to try a new updo on the king's mistress. She looked like a startled giraffe. He's now sweeping Versailles' marble steps in exile. Powdered wig, swapped for a ratty bonnet. But you're steady, calm, until the queen bursts in unannounced, demanding a mirror, a comb, and for you to fix whatever that is, pointing to her hairpiece with a fury only reserved for tax increases and stale macarons. You comply, of course. You always comply, because you're not just a barber. You're a servant of the court, a wielder of appearances, a maker of illusions. And you probably won't survive this. Your hands are still trembling from the queen's surprise inspection when the next client enters. It's the Comtesse de Lévignac, swathed in silk, dragging a cloud of orange blossom perfume and 4 layers of political anxiety behind her. She doesn't greet you. She never does. Instead, she slumps into the chair, closes her eyes, and mutters, "Make me powerful." You nod. You know what she means. Not charming, not pretty, powerful. Today's appointment is less about beauty and more about strategy. This is Versailles, after all, where appearances aren't everything. They're the only thing. The tools of your trade await. A tray of scented pomades, white as candle wax and twice as volatile. Fine brushes carved from squirrel hair. Hairpins thin enough to slip notes through barred windows. And the pièce de résistance, powder. Wig powder is your battlefield dust. A mixture of starch, flour, and crushed lavender, orris root if you're feeling bold. It clings to everything, gets in your lungs, your eyes, your dreams. But it's mandatory. Without it, the elaborate wigs collapse into sad, greasy heaps like overcooked noodles. Today's style is La Montagne, a terrifying 3-foot structure of stacked rolls, bows, and symbolic birds' nests. Last week, the Duchesse de Fleury had a ship sculpted into hers. The prow lit up with tiny lanterns. Someone sneezed near her, and she nearly caught fire. You glance at Leon. He's holding the wig cage like it's a sleeping baby. The Comtesse's hair is already pulled tight and powdered, standing stiff like frozen grass. You start winding, weaving, and whispering compliments. Such fine texture, madame. Never mind the patches of mildew. She opens one eye. Do you think the Marquise will be jealous? Devastated, you lie. She'll faint straight into the arms of her footman. Satisfied, the Comtesse closes her eye again. You work faster. There's an unspoken timer counting down in your head. The moment when the starch begins to set and the entire tower must lock into place or collapse. You've learned to read this like a sixth sense, or how rats know when a ship is about to sink. Powder fills the air. You cough discreetly into your sleeve, inhaling a cloud of rose and lard. It's in your teeth now. You taste prestige and panic. A mainstream fact, in case you were wondering, during Louis XVI's reign, wig powder consumption soared. Aristocrats could spend the equivalent of thousands of dollars a year just to maintain their hair pieces, never mind their actual hair, which was often shaved completely to accommodate more ornate wigs. Hygiene? That was a low priority. The smell of powder and perfume was preferable to body odor, which everyone simply accepted. You, however, cannot accept. So you tuck a linen sachet filled with thyme and mint into each nostril, like some nasal armor. And yet, the rot still seeps through. You notice a little movement near the Comtesse's temple. Just the twitch of her brow? No, there it is again. You lean closer and discover the worst. Lice. Not just one or two, but a colony marching like powdered soldiers across her scalp. You fight the urge to drop everything and flee. Instead, you discreetly swap out your brush for a brass one and apply a liberal layer of mercury pomade. It stings her skin. She winces, but says nothing. That means it's working. Mercury is deadly, of course, but it also kills lice and gives the hair a silvery sheen. It's a fringe remedy still debated in the barbering guild. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of toxic treatments like mercury and lead contributed to the shorter lifespans of courtiers. You suspect yes, very much yes. As you attach the final birdcage curl to her crown, Leon whispers, "Next client in 3 minutes." And he's sweating. Oh no, that means it's Monsieur de Pradelle, an overweight duke with unfortunate glands and a penchant for elaborate hair art involving theatrical themes. You'll need extra powder and probably a mop. But for now, you step back. The Comtesse opens both eyes, stares at her reflection, and smirks. "I'll crush her," she mutters. You're not sure whether she means the Marquise socially or physically. Either way, you nod. "You'll be unforgettable." She tosses you a small gold coin. Tips are rare. You try not to look surprised. She exits, leaving behind a trail of crumbling powder and a single confused bird feather. You exhale. One down. Just 19 more today. There's no time to rest. You wipe down the chair, check your mirror. Your cheeks are flushed with heat and powder, and prep a new batch of pomade. This one contains goose fat and lilac oil. You call it Spring Carnage. Clients love it. By now, your lungs ache, your fingertips are pruny with sweat, and your apron looks like it survived a bakery explosion. But you keep going, because in this palace of peacocks, you're the silent puppeteer behind every plume, and no one survives the court without looking absolutely flawless. The moment you hear the heavy breathing echoing down the marble corridor, you brace yourself. Monsieur de Pradelle has arrived. He lumbers into your salon like a war elephant, trailed by two silent footmen and an overstuffed portfolio of sketches. He slams them on the table with the drama of a playwright presenting a final act. "Today," he wheezes, "we become Apollo descending from Olympus with a comet's tail." You blink, then you nod. Of course, Apollo, comet, easy. Leon looks at you with eyes that scream, "Do we have comet powder?" You send him a subtle flick of the wrist. He knows what it means. Improvise. You usher Monsieur de Pradelle into the reinforced chair, the one you had custom built after last summer's La Tour Eiffel incident, when he nearly snapped your best armchair in two. His sweat has already soaked through 3 layers of linen and is now beading along his temples. You begin by gently mopping it up with a lace-edged towel. He likes lace, says it makes him feel inspired. You remember another court barber once joked, "He sweats ambition." That barber now trims hedges in Normandy. You inspect his wig, an ambitious piece in its own right, thick with glue and the regret of previous stylists. You pry it off like a reluctant oyster from its shell. Beneath, the Duke's scalp steams. Steam. From a person, you dab more. Then you begin your work. The comet effect requires layers. Curls cascading in tight spirals down his back, fanned out like a celestial tail. For the Apollo motif, you'll need a central sunburst. You twist golden ribbons into radiating loops, threading them through the main curl stack. As you dust the final layer of pale orange powder across the structure, you whisper, "Just like the heavens." He preens. "Yes, let the Maréchal de Vence see this." You know his feud with the Maréchal is half the reason he gets his hair done 3 times a week. Last month, the Maréchal appeared at court with tiny theatrical actors perched in his wig, performing a mute rendition of the Marriage of Figaro. No one could hear the king's speech over the clapping. You add the finishing touch, a sparkled brooch shaped like a flame pinned into the crown, and with that, Apollo has landed. But the real danger isn't the weight or the complexity. It's what happens next. Because while you're trimming a stray curl behind the Duke's ear, he leans in and whispers, "You've heard, of course, about the new mistress?" You blink. This is not idle gossip. This is court intelligence. "No, monsieur," you murmur, keeping your scissors steady. "I've been too busy with Apollonian matters." He chuckles. "Of course. Well, they say she's from Lyon. Her father a merchant. But just then, the door swings open. The king's secretary peeks in. "Your presence is requested." Immediately, you freeze. Not you. Him. Monsieur de Pradelle pales. "Now?" The secretary nods, grim. "The king saw your silhouette from the balcony. He demands to know what's on your head." Well, this could go either way. You accompany the Duke through the salons, past gasping courtiers and snickering valets. Whispers chase you like perfume. "Apollo? It's not even Sunday. He's trying too hard." At the king's chambers, you watch from a respectful distance as Louis XVI eyes the ensemble. He leans back, folds his hands, and says nothing for an excruciating 20 seconds. Then, it makes your ears look wide. The room erupts in stifled laughter. The Duke's face crumples. He mutters something about retiring to the countryside and shuffles out like a defeated balloon. You follow discreetly. Back in the salon, he collapses into the chair and demands brandy. You hand it to him. After 2 swigs, he sighs. "Do you know," he mutters, "I used to have real hair, long, black curls, before powder, before all this." You nod politely, though you doubt that's true. He dozes off, and Leon uses the moment to whisper, "You've got a line forming, and someone left a duck in the hallway." Of course they did. As you prep the next basin, you reflect on a fringe tidbit. Barbers at court were often privy to more intelligence than ministers. They worked on all sides, nobility, clergy, even diplomats, and their proximity during grooming led to accidental confessions and overheard alliances. In fact, some were officially recruited as informants, which is why you never write anything down. You carry all secrets in your head, protected only by discretion and plausible deniability. Still, historians debate how much influence barbers truly had. Were they silent observers or subtle manipulators, pulling strings with just the right snip? The truth is probably somewhere in the powdered middle. All you know is this: if someone asks about the mistress from Lyon, you didn't hear a thing. By midday, your knees are giving you subtle warnings. Twinges when you lean, cramps when you reach. But there's no time to rest. Your next appointment isn't just anyone. It's the Duc d'Aumont, master of the royal hunt, commander of 10 greyhounds, and wearer of what is possibly the largest widow's peak in France. You hear him before you see him. His boots strike the floor like he's chasing a deer through Versailles. He storms in, cloak flying, mustache bristling with indignation. "I was observed," he hisses, slamming his leather gloves onto your counter. "In profile, by Madame de Guémené, at an angle most unflattering." He glares at the mirror. "Fix it." You nod solemnly and gesture toward the chair. He sits with a huff. "This is not about aesthetics. This is about power. Every haircut in Versailles is a performance, not just for the client, but for the audience, the ever-lurking nobles, the fluttering courtiers, and the footmen who gossip more efficiently than newspapers. No move you make goes unnoticed. Even today, there are at least 3 powdered ladies pretending to read pamphlets in the far corners of your salon, listening for scandal with ears sharper than your shears. You reach for your tools, mentally rehearsing the exact snips needed to frame the Duke's unfortunate brow. The trick here is angles. You want to build volume at the temples, flare at the sides, and create the illusion of youth without drawing attention to the retreating front. As you trim, your brush grazes the mole near his left ear. He flinches. "Careful, that mole is ancestral." "Of course," you murmur. "Looks very noble today." He snorts. You're not sure if that's approval, but at least he hasn't drawn his sword. Because yes, duels over hair have happened. One famously took place behind the orangery after a noble accused another of mocking his frizzed fringe. The insult was subtle. "It looks like a sheep's dream." A week later, someone limped away, bleeding but victorious. His fringe was never mentioned again. You work in silence, carefully snipping and sculpting. The stakes are high, literally. The royal guard stands just outside the door, one eye always peeking in. You're not considered safe exactly. After all, you're one slip away from slicing a duke's throat. The razor doesn't know the difference between hair and skin. You do. Your hands tremble a bit as you make the final cut. A tiny tuft falls into the basin. The Duke squints at himself. Yes, that'll undo her. Undo her, not me. That's how you know it's a win. But before he leaves, he leans close. "Have you heard?" he whispers. "The Swiss Guard. Half of them are cutting their hair. Revolutionary fashion." You blink. "Isn't that forbidden?" He nods. "Exactly. That's why it's interesting." You tuck that away, careful not to react. Even the shape of your eyebrows is watched for political signals. Raise them too high, and you're a radical. Furrow them too long, and you're a monarchist. You've learned the art of resting neutral face better than any actor at the Comédie Française. The Duke leaves, tossing a few coins on the counter. One lands in a jar of comb cleaner. Leon frowns, fishing it out with tongs. Next, he sighs, is Madame d'Aubigny. She brought her own wig and her own mirror. Of course she did. She sweeps in moments later, trailing satin and judgment. Without a word, she places her personal mirror on your counter, a gold-framed monstrosity nearly the size of a window, and plops down with the confidence of someone who's been spoiled since infancy. Do not touch the curls on the left, she says. They represent the birth of my son. The right side is for my daughter. Center is neutral territory. You nod. Shall I refresh the powder? She closes her eyes. Yes, but only with violet. Lavender makes me look pious. As you gently tap violet powder into her crown, Leon brings a tray of oils. You choose almond and bergamot. Sweet, but assertive. She inhales. Acceptable. Midway through, she opens one eye and catches your reflection in her mirror. You blink too much, she says. Apologies, madame. Try to look more reverent. You do. You continue working under her scrutiny, which is now double, her and her mirror, and you reflect, bitterly amused, on a curious fringe tradition. Some nobles kept multiple mirrors in the salon to triangulate their appearance. They wanted to see themselves as others would from every angle, particularly during dances or sudden turns in conversation. Mirrors were a weapon, both armor and surveillance. Historians still argue whether this obsession with appearance contributed to the monarchy's downfall. Was it decadence that did them in, or distraction? Versailles was a theater, and while they watched themselves, revolution brewed in the wings. You finish her look with a delicate ribbon, precisely the color of late summer grapes. She finally smiles. Perfect. I shall crush Madame de Noailles. Another battle won. Another client prepped for a war that only plays out in glances, gasps, and gossip. You bow, and then, before you can breathe, Leon hands you the next card. Guess who's back? He whispers. You groan. Not the bishop. Oh yes, the bishop, with his thinning hair, his moral superiority, and his absolute refusal to tip. Time to put your soul and your scissors back on the line. You'd think, perhaps, that clergy would be easier clients, humble, quiet, grateful. Not so with Bishop de la Croix. He enters like a thunderclap in silk stockings, robes sweeping wide enough to knock over Leon's entire pomade station. His hair is barely there, just a wispy halo of what used to be curls, but he treats each surviving strand like holy relics. I expect discretion, he announces before even sitting down, which is ironic, considering he's already announced it to half the hallway. You nod solemnly. Of course, Monseigneur. As always, he sits. His weight presses the chair to its limit. You offer a perfumed cloth to dab his forehead. He swats it away. Too worldly. You tuck it into your sleeve. Today's cut is delicate. He wants the side smoothed, the top fluffed, and the crown left blessedly untouched. You begin your work, careful not to nick the freckle above his ear. Last time you grazed it, he launched into a 20-minute homily on divine punishment. As you comb and shape, he lectures. I've heard rumors, you know, about powdered wigs concealing intentions, red powder for rebellion, violet for vanity. It's dangerous what hair has become. You murmur something non-committal, focusing on teasing the last of his hair forward. He has barely enough for the illusion of volume, so you'll need to pin the strands over a filler, a little cushion of dyed wool, dyed with crushed beetle shells and rose oil, if you're curious. Courtiers call it the puff of mercy. It's your only hope of making him look presentable. Still, he isn't wrong. Smells are political and dangerous. You work in clouds of them. Bergamot to indicate power, vanilla for seduction, rosemary to project innocence. Some clients wear sachets of nutmeg under their wigs to heighten clarity, though in truth it just makes them sneeze during long sermons. What they can't seem to mask, however, is the smell of everything else. Court life is fetid beneath the powder. Versailles smells like roses and sewage, honey and mildew. The pipes are ancient, the courtyards full of horses, and the nobles, well, they don't bathe much. To survive it all, you've developed a trick. Crushed mint, soaked in linen and stuffed into your nostrils. Uncomfortable? Yes. Essential? Absolutely. Leon's version is more dramatic. He wears a perfumed handkerchief, folded like a little triangle under his nose, claiming it makes him look like a Venetian assassin. It does not. Still, you envy his flair, a mainstream fact. To battle the overwhelming stench of court life, courtiers often carried small silver vinaigrettes, tiny containers of vinegar-soaked sponges infused with herbs. Some wore them as pendants. Others kept them sewn into their sleeves, discreetly sniffing them during moments of particularly strong offense. Historians still argue whether this olfactory war influenced the rise of French perfumery, or whether the industry simply boomed out of necessity. You, however, don't need to argue. You know, without scent, this place would collapse under its own funk. The bishop clears his throat. You're being rather quiet today. Just meditating on the divine balance of symmetry, you reply. He nods, pleased. A sacred calling. You finish with a puff of white powder and a cross-shaped comb insert. He examines himself in the mirror. You watch his mouth twitch. Is that satisfaction? No, of course not. This will do, he says, standing abruptly. But the back leans slightly. You rush to adjust, but he's already out the door. No coin, no thanks. Just the lingering trail of stale incense and moral superiority. You exhale. Leon brings you a glass of water and a pastry shaped like a fleur-de-lis. Don't eat it, he says. It tastes like sadness. You nibble it anyway. Across the room, another client paces nervously. The Marquise de Clairefonds. Her appointment isn't until this afternoon, but she's early and clearly distressed. She rushes over. "Did you hear?" she whispers. "About the cook? The one who was caught eavesdropping?" You nod slowly. "I heard rumors. They say someone at the king's table suspected poison. The cook's hair was examined, powder samples taken. Can you imagine?" You can. In fact, it's happened before. That's why your powders come in unlabeled jars. You keep a personal stash hidden beneath the floorboard, your own blends, safe from tampering. You trust no one, not even Leon. He doesn't know about the floorboard. Poison Paranoia is back in fashion. They're testing makeup for arsenic, eye drops for belladonna. You once had a duchess bring in a sample of face powder to see if you could taste test it for venom. You declined. Courtiers believe appearances are masks. You know better. They're weapons. And every morning you help sharpen them. You stand up, stretch your arms, and glance toward the clock. 4 more clients before supper. 3 duels scheduled this evening. 1 missing apprentice. A spilled jar of rose water. And somewhere in the hall, the distinct sound of someone vomiting. Probably the cook. Probably stress. You take another bite of your sad pastry and get back to work. Because until someone wigs the guillotine itself, appearances must be maintained. The sun slips slightly westward, pouring amber light through the upper windows of the salon, catching flecks of powder in the air like floating fireflies. It would be beautiful if your eyes didn't burn from the constant irritation of flour, perfume, and panic. Leon is scraping lard from a pewter pot with a butter knife. You're refreshing your scissors in a vinegar rinse, and your next client is already here, flipping through pamphlets she clearly can't read, occasionally scratching at her temple with a fan's ivory edge. Lady Victoire de Montlouis, elegant, sharp, infested. You clock it within seconds of her arrival. Her curls have that dry, wiry puff that suggests over-powdering and underwashing. As she lowers herself daintily into your chair, you spot it, a tiny movement near the hairline, the telltale flicker of life, lice. Again, you smile serenely and begin your ritual. First, a gentle misting of rosemary water to lull both client and critters. Then the inspection, subtle, methodical, disguised as an assessment of curl health. She's rambling about a theater production in Lyon and doesn't notice you switch combs halfway through. The first one is for show. The second is brass, fine-toothed, rubbed with vinegar and thyme. You catch 3 immediately. Leon sees them and mutters under his breath, "Bastion breach." This is your 3rd infestation this week, and it's only Wednesday. You consider pausing the appointment, suggesting a cleanse, maybe even a medicinal shave, but you know better. Clients do not like being told they are unclean, especially not noble ones. So you press on, adjusting your strategy. You reach for the peppermint balm, a strong, tingling concoction reserved for revitalizing tired scalps, though it's really for lice triage. As you massage it in, Lady Victoire lets out a pleased sigh. Such a refreshing touch, she says. Yes, madame. You've been under stress, no? Dreadfully, she groans. I believe the Duchess of Bragelonne is spreading rumors again. She says I haven't changed my wig design in over a month. You cluck sympathetically, fingers now working fast beneath the curls. Jealousy is so predictable. It's part of your job to affirm, to soothe, to style not just hair, but reputation. Each curl, each pin, each powder puff is a form of defense against humiliation. But the lice aren't your only concern today. Beneath Lady Victoire's powdered neckline, you notice a rash, red, raised, and irritated. You pause. Have you changed perfumes recently? You ask gently. Just a new face wash, she says, with essence of lemon and vinegar and crocodile dung. You blink. Ah, another quirky tidbit. During the 18th century, certain aristocrats experimented with exotic skincare formulas. One popular myth claimed ancient Egyptian women used crocodile dung as part of their beauty regimen. Naturally, Versailles ran with it. There's even a whisper that the Queen tried a dung mask once, though historians still argue whether that was an insult invented by pamphleteers or a very unfortunate experiment in exfoliation. Either way, it explains the rash. You nod politely and change the subject. The truth is, skin conditions, lice, and general hygiene horrors are all part of your day-to-day, but they must be managed discreetly with the same elegance you apply to hair. Because if Lady Victoire realizes what you've found, she'll blame you. You'll be accused of stressing the scalp, over-powdering, or even cursing the follicles. There was a case last year where a barber was locked in a wine cellar for allegedly giving a countess dandruff. He's out now, but his hands still shake. You finish the session with a spiral braid tucked along the crown and a velvet ribbon to distract from the slightly raw temple skin. She coos into her mirror and tosses you a sugar-dusted candy. You don't eat it. No food from Victoire. Ever. She leaves in a swirl of floral disaster. Leon returns with a note. It's the Comte de Vrong. He needs a private visit. Says it's urgent. Says his scalp is attacking him. You sigh. Tell him I'll come after the duchesses. You'll want gloves, Leon mutters. You pause. Both hands? He nods. You groan. It's going to be that kind of evening. Back in the salon, you refresh the towels, sterilize the combs, and drop the lice-laced brush into the emergency pot of burning vinegar. A day in the life, as they say. And you haven't even touched your lunch. You glance at your wrapped bread roll, sitting forgotten by the mirror. Leon sits beside you, powder smudged across his brow like war paint. You ever think about quitting? You chew quietly, then shake your head. Someone has to keep this place from scratching itself to death. The afternoon sun casts long, honey-colored lines across the parquet floors, illuminating the powder motes like falling snow in a dream you can't quite wake from. But you're very much awake and very much preparing for a man who could decide your career with the tilt of a brow. You've just wiped the last traces of peppermint balm from your hands when a familiar voice slithers through the open door. Darling, tell me, am I still devastating? You turn, smile, already plastered in place. The Maréchal de Saint-Cyr glides in like a cat that owns the palace. She's tall, draped in violet silk, and wears a wig so high it's rumored to have its own title. Behind her trails her lapdog, Margot, adorned with a matching ribbon and exactly 0 manners. You motion toward the chair, which she ignores. Instead, she steps to the window and gazes out, dramatically backlit, as though preparing for a portrait. I need something new, something that says, I am above the whispers, but might start one. You nod. You know the language of Versailles. What she wants is armor, fashioned not from steel, but from ringlets and rumors. You begin with a light touch, letting the comb glide through her heavy strands. You've worked on her for years. You know the shape of her scalp better than your own handwriting. She speaks softly now. They say the king has been melancholy, that he asked for a quiet supper. No music, no laughter. You nod again. That's not just court gossip. That's a tremor in the ground beneath your feet. Because the king's moods are more than moods. Their policy, their fashion, their paychecks. When he sulks, the whole court shivers. Nobles go gray, trying to guess what offended him. Entire musical programs are rewritten. Even the soup changes. And for you, a single grimace from His Majesty in your salon could become very quiet, very fast. So you work carefully, layering her hair into what you call the cascade. Tight curls at the temples, a voluminous swirl at the back, and just enough height to suggest confidence without arrogance. You powder with subtle lavender, not the aggressive rose she favors. She notices. New scent? Yes, you whisper. Soft, less combative. She gives you the faintest of smiles, wise, and then disaster. Margot, her tiny dog, jumps onto the vanity and pees directly into the box of fresh ribbons. Leon shrieks. You drop your powder puff. The Maréchal freezes. For a moment, everything is suspended, like a painting of a salon on the brink of collapse. Then she exhales. Well, she has good taste. You chuckle shakily. She prefers violet. Leon mutters something about sending the dog to a tannery. You glare him into silence. You clean the mess, replace the ribbons, and resume the styling with trembling fingers. You're just finishing the final pin when she leans in and whispers, Have you heard about Madame Destienne? You hesitate. She doesn't wait for your answer. They say she weeps during appointments, sits there, powder streaked down her cheeks. Her husband is leaving her for a nun. You nod, pressing a lock into place. She's been requesting raven-colored powder. Quite dramatic. The Marechal tilts her head. Maybe I'll try that next week, if it's not too tragic by then. That's Versailles logic. Emotional crises are just fashion trends waiting for approval. A fringe tidbit for you. Some noble women paid actors to weep outside their salons. It made them look interesting, complex, mysterious. You once styled a duchess who hired a violinist to stand outside and play minor chords during her appointments. Historians still argue whether these displays were genuine melancholy or just elaborate one-upmanship in a society so obsessed with appearances it forgot how to tell the difference. You know the answer. Both. The Marechal rises, examines herself in the mirror, and gives you the nod. Devastating, she declares. As promised, she tosses a coin onto the counter and a ribbon onto Leon's head. For your bravery, she says. He nods solemnly, as if accepting a medal. As she exits, Margot snorts and nearly topples a tray of pins. You catch it just in time. Once the door closes, you collapse onto the stool. That, Leon breathes, was a near-death experience. You don't disagree, but you don't have time to dwell on it, because the next appointment is here. The Marquis de Belleroche, the king's distant cousin, fond of duels, silk, and accusing people of spiritual flatness. You rub your temples. He always wants his curls arranged to resemble Roman virtues. You still have no idea what that means, but you'll figure it out, because here, your scissors don't just cut hair. They carve status, deflect gossip, and sometimes, just sometimes, hold a crumbling life together. The Marquis de Belleroche enters like thunder in perfume form. His cologne hits you before his voice does. Musk, sandalwood, something smoky you suspect might be burnt parchment. Good day, he declares, pausing to let the words hang. I'm feeling stoic. You nod as though this makes any sense. He shrugs off his embroidered overcoat, plum velvet with gold frogs, and settles into the chair like Caesar awaiting a laurel wreath. His profile is carefully angled toward the mirror. I wish to be sculpted today, he announces, like marble. You set aside the standard cheers. This will be a performance. The Marquis has a notorious reputation for reinventing himself weekly. One day, he's a Greek tragedian. The next, a Venetian libertine. Last month, he requested the Spartan look, which you interpreted as slightly tighter curls. He called it existentially liberating. Today, he wants to channel ancient Rome. You begin by dividing his hair into clean sections. His natural hair, thin, flaxen, wiry, requires reinforcement. You reach for the curled extensions made of goat hair and silk fibers, dyed a soft chestnut to match the more dignified hue he prefers this week. He sighs theatrically. I heard Madame de Sévigné called me vapid. You raise an eyebrow but say nothing. You've heard worse. She wouldn't know virtue if it bit her wig, he mutters. I've studied Seneca. I am virtue. You begin working on a structured half-crown of curls with subtle wave lines, shaped inward like coiled scrolls. It's meant to evoke wisdom, or maybe defiance, or possibly a clever way to hide his receding temples. He watches your hands with the fascination of someone who thinks art happens only when he's watching. To his credit, he holds still. Most clients fidget, scratch, or talk with their hands, but the Marquise, he poses as if you're painting him. Occasionally, he quotes Latin. Fortuna audacis juvat, he says. Fortune favors the bold, you reply. He grins. And the powdered. Your fingers work faster. A mainstream fact. Hair as philosophy wasn't entirely uncommon. During the Enlightenment, appearance and ideology often blurred. A man's curls could declare his alignment with rationalism, romanticism, or even revolution. The more structured the style, the more orderly his thinking appeared. A mess of hair implied a mess of mind. Versailles took this very seriously, and yet, beneath the curls, lice still lurked, same as anywhere. The Marquis shifts. Tell me, have you heard about the powder ration? You blink. Ration? He leans in, whispering. They say flour prices are rising. Too many riots. Too much bread needed. The king might ban decorative powder altogether. You glance toward the door, instinctively lowering your voice. That can't be true, but it could. You've seen the tension mounting. Bread lines in Paris, riots in the outer towns, and increasingly pale courtiers trying to hide their guilt under even paler powder. I'll need to stockpile, he muses. If I must choose between bread and beauty, I know where I stand. You don't doubt that. Leon peeks in with a tray of tiny gilded clasps. Do we want the bronze or the obsidian? He asks. The Marquis lifts a finger. Obsidian. For gravity. Naturally, you pin the final curls into place. The effect is striking. Stately, dark, almost Roman. You didn't think you could pull it off, but here it is. He looks 10 years younger, or at least 2 insults richer. He leans toward the mirror, pleased. This will crush the archbishop. You don't ask why. He's in competition with clergy. You never do. He stands, gives you a deep nod, and drops a silver coin onto your tray. A real one, not the counterfeit tokens some nobles have started using to test loyalty. He's halfway out the door when he turns and adds, Don't ever let anyone tell you this is just hair. And with that, he's gone. Leon exhales loudly. He's exhausting, flammable, you add, pointing at the cologne trail he left behind. You barely have time to reset the chair before your next appointment. The Comtesse d'Orléans, a woman of quiet cruelty and exquisite taste. She always brings her own powder, an imported blend from Venice rumored to contain crushed pearls. She also insists that no one speaks during her styling. Not you. not Leon, not even the mirror. You work in silence, each stroke of the comb echoing like a footstep in a cathedral. She stares straight ahead. Occasionally, she flinches. Once, she smiles, but only at her own reflection. The powder does shimmer. You hate to admit it, but it's gorgeous. Subtle glints of light, soft iridescence, almost celestial. You lean in close to adjust a ribbon and notice it again. The smell, bitter, sharp, not powder, not perfume, something chemical. You know that scent. Arsenic. Your stomach drops, just slightly. Some Venetian powders were rumored to contain toxic substances, whitening agents so potent they killed slowly over months. And some ladies preferred them, said the effect was worth it. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rate among fashion-obsessed nobles was caused by court stress, general health, or the very beauty products they worshipped. You'd wager all three. Still, you don't say a word, because the Comtesse doesn't want truth. She wants perfection, and you deliver it. You barely have time to clean the combs before the next disaster, client you mean, arrives. Madame de Rochefort bursts in red-faced, gasping for breath. "My wig!" she shrieks. "My new wig! It caught fire at supper!" Leo stops mid-step, a jar of pins clutched to his chest. "Fire?" She nods frantically, waving smoke-scented gloves. "I leaned too close to the candelabra during the dessert course. The cherries jubilee weren't the only thing flambéed." You guide her gently to the chair, trying not to laugh. It's not polite, of course, but inside you're wheezing. This is not the first fire you've dealt with. Versailles, for all its opulence, is a labyrinth of hazards. Open flames, flammable fabrics, overstuffed wigs lacquered with alcohol-based pomades. It's a miracle the palace hasn't burned down 3 times a week. And yet, fashion stops for no one. You begin assessing the damage. Her wig is a mess, half melted with singed feathers and scorched lace. Her real hair beneath is mercifully untouched, though her pride has clearly suffered second-degree burns. "Can you save it?" she whispers. You take a breath. "Yes, but we'll need to work fast and dampen everything." She nods. "Dampen away." You retrieve your emergency pomade blend. Goose fat, lanolin, and a splash of rosewater. Leo hands you the bottle of powdered alum, used not just for styling, but also as a fire retardant. Yes, really. As you begin smoothing the charred strands and replacing the damaged segments with new curls from your drawer of backups, she dabs her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "I was trying to impress the Spanish ambassador," she sniffles. "He complimented my plumage. I thought he meant me, but he meant the wig." You nod sympathetically. "He clearly has no taste." And now, she moans, "he thinks I'm a torch." "Well," you say, securing a new curl with a gold pin, "you've always had a radiant presence." She chuckles, barely. Small victories. A mainstream fact for context. Wigs at Versailles weren't just decorations. They were status symbols, sometimes over 3 feet tall, adorned with tiny ships, birds, fruit arrangements, or even mechanical elements. Pomades made from animal fat kept everything in place, but made the wigs highly flammable. Fires at dinner parties were alarmingly common. In fact,
Queen Marie Leszczyska once lost an entire sleeve to an enthusiastic candle while reaching for bread.
Leon, you say softly, keep the water bowl close. He nods, eyes wide. It's already under the chair. Madame de Rochefort closes her eyes, while you dust a fresh layer of powder over the newly assembled wig. You blend a subtle tint of plum with pearl to give it a slightly iridescent shimmer. Your signature move when salvaging a style. I feel renewed, she says, quietly. You lean closer, adjusting a curl. That's because you are like a phoenix. She actually laughs this time. Then I suppose I'll rise from the ashes with better posture. You finish with a delicate netting, just in case she attends another candle at supper. As she stands and examines herself in the mirror, her expression shifts from horror to hesitance to satisfaction. You're a miracle worker, she whispers. No, you reply, just very good with burned birds. She tosses you a tiny pouch of coins, real silver by the weight, and glides out, holding her head high. Leon exhales. One day we'll run out of wigs and matches on the same afternoon. You smile. Then we'll switch to helmets. The salon door swings open again. This time, it's a pair. Duchesse de Montier and Countess Vierville, rivals since birth, never seen in the same room except when you're involved. They enter from opposite ends of the corridor, stare each other down, and silently race to the chair. You sigh. This is about to be a powder room duel.
I have the 3:30,
declares the Duchess. I have a standing appointment, counters the Countess, placing her gloves firmly on your counter, like territorial markers. They both turn to you. Well, they say, in unison. You pause, then gesture graciously. Ladies, if you're willing, I can style you both simultaneously. Leon chokes on his tea. Their eyes narrow. Show me, the Duchess says. And so begins your most delicate act of the day. 2 clients, 2 attitudes, 1 chair, 1 mirror, split down the middle with a silk fan. You work like a conductor. Left hand, sleek twist with lavender for the Duchess. Right hand, braided crown with citrus for the Countess. They talk over each other, complain about each other, praise themselves. You don't speak. You're deep in the trance of high-pressure artistry. Leon stands to the side, holding combs in both hands, like a surgical assistant. An open, scholarly debate in the guild is whether simultaneous styling is an art or an affliction. Some say it requires genius. Others say it leads to madness. You suspect both are true, as your vision blurs slightly near the end. But by some powdered miracle, you finish both heads within 30 minutes. Perfect symmetry, no bloodshed. They examine their reflections. They sniff. They nod. Then they both say, I'll outshine her. Unge. They sweep out of the salon without another word. Leon collapses onto the floor. You rinse your hands. It's not even evening yet, but already you've survived fire, vanity, and twin tempests of ambition. You check your schedule. Up next, the Queen's hairmaid. And she's crying. Of course she is. You spot her before she says a word. Marie-Louise, one of the Queen's personal hairmaids, hunched on the salon bench with red-rimmed eyes and a bonnet too tight across her brow. She's wringing her hands like they've offended someone. You give her a nod and gesture gently toward the stool by the side window, the one usually reserved for quiet appointments, last-minute repairs, and emotional triage. She hesitates, then shuffles forward. Something happened? You ask softly. She looks up, tears threatening again. The Queen, she said I made her look tired.
You wince. That's worse than an insult. At court, tired is a political statement. Tired means out of touch, weakened, approaching disfavor. You've seen ladies faint at such accusations. Some never return from them.
You guide her into the seat and gently begin undoing the tight lacework around her temples. She didn't mean it, you say, half lie, half truth. She did, Marie-Louise says. She was already furious because her new imported powder arrived clumpy. Then she saw her reflection and she breaks off, wiping her cheek with the back of her wrist. You murmur comfort and begin combing slowly. Her scalp is tense. You can feel the grief stored in the roots. She has a mask tonight, Marie-Louise whispers. If she doesn't look immaculate, she'll blame me again. You nod. You understand too well, so you get to work. This isn't just a matter of style. It's about reputation management. The Queen must appear serene, radiant above it all. And tonight, the style must whisper elegance and command obedience, which means you must whisper miracles into every strand. You reach for your most delicate tools. Ivory comb, duck feather puff, the powder blend you save for spiritual emergencies, a pale champagne hue with hints of lavender and crushed pearl. Let's begin, you say gently, and while we're at it, we'll make you look unbothered too. You lift her hair in sections, massaging her scalp with a blend of rose oil and a dash of white clay to lift any oil and settle irritation. Her shoulders lower inch by inch. Leon, sensing the gravity, brings a cup of cooled verbena tea and sets it silently by her hand. As you weave a braid across the back of her crown and begin curling the front, you murmur stories, little distractions. And do you know, the Duchesse de Rohan once blamed a lost chess match on the symmetry of her part. Marie-Louise chuckles wetly. True, she had it restyled before the second round. Still lost. Her laugh is small but real. You see her shoulders ease another inch. You powder lightly, only at the roots. Too much would weigh the style down, and besides, the Queen favors natural volume this season, which is to say, artificial lift that looks like you woke up that way. You pin the braid into a soft coil, then secure a thin violet ribbon just behind her ear. The final touch is a dusting of fine glitter, crushed shell, rare, almost imperceptible unless the candlelight hits it just right. When you turn the mirror toward her, she gasps. I look like her. No, you smile. You look better because you're real. Tears up again, but this time from relief. A fringe tidbit for the moment. Some royal hairmaids were so skilled they quietly influenced fashion beyond the Queen's chambers. A few even received coded letters from foreign courts requesting diagrams of styles seen during Versailles masquerades. These letters often came hidden in ribbon shipments or perfume crates.
It's said one hairmaid's powder mix sparked a 3-month lavender shortage in Vienna.
Marie-Louise stands and hugs you briefly. A breach of protocol, but one you allow.
As she leaves, Leon whispers, "You're going to heaven for that one."
You snort. Not if they find out how much glitter I used.
The mood shifts abruptly with the arrival of your next client, a woman you've never met. She enters unannounced, wearing a hood and no escort.
Is this the salon of the court barber?
She asks, voice like dry silk.
You nod, cautious. I need your best work, and I need no one to know I was here.
Leon raises a brow. You motion him to close the doors. She removes her hood and your breath catches. It's the king's cousin. The one who disappeared 6 months ago under very complicated circumstances. There were rumors of political scandal, of a duel gone wrong, of sympathies with revolutionaries. And now here she is, in your salon.
You swallow. What can I do for you?
I need a style, she says slowly, that will make me recognizable, but not too recognizable. I'm attending the mask tonight, and I want him to notice me.
You don't ask who him is. You simply begin.
You choose the tools carefully. A slim comb, the darkest powder in your collection, and a technique you haven't used in years, a style called la disparition. It lifts the cheekbones, softens the jawline, and draws the gaze upward. You learned it from your mentor, a barber who once disguised a duchess long enough to let her escape a duel with her sister-in-law. As you sculpt, she watches you in the mirror.
You don't seem afraid, she says.
You pause. I'm always afraid. I just don't show it while curling.
She smiles,
And for a moment, as your hands work magic into her hair, you wonder what you've just stepped into. But you don't ask, because some secrets are safer tucked beneath pins and powder. The door closes behind her with a whisper, and you're left staring at the curls you just sculpted, each one hiding a question you'd be foolish to answer. Leon stands near the windows, visibly shaken. That was her, wasn't it? He says quietly. The one with the...
You hold up a hand.
She was no one, and no one left.
He swallows hard and nods.
Understood.
You glance at your schedule, but your next appointment isn't written down. That's strange.
Then you hear it. The unmistakable sound of dueling boots in echoing rhythm, accompanied by a cane that clicks with intent. Oh no.
It's Madame d'Eglantine.
She's not technically nobility, but don't tell her that. She was married to an aristocrat for 42 days before he was poisoned by a tragic misunderstanding involving nutmeg. Ever since, she styled herself as court-adjacent and insists on hair arrangements fit for diplomatic audiences, despite being persona non grata at most court functions.
She enters like a tempest. I need something elevated, something that says, "Don't ask about my late husband, unless you'd like to meet him."
You nod solemnly. A grieving fortress, then. Yes, and with height. I want to look taller than God's patience. You retrieve your tallest wig frame, an iron wire scaffold that resembles a tiny siege tower. This one hasn't been used since the wedding cake incident last spring, which ended with someone fainting, someone proposing,
and one very angry pastry chef. You begin curling her hair at the base, pinning it around the frame like ivy scaling a cathedral. She closes her eyes and starts humming something from an opera that was banned after making the dolphin cry. Can we incorporate something weapon-like? She asks, eyes still shut. You pause. A dagger motif, perhaps? She smiles faintly. Exactly. Leon brings over the accessories box. You select 2 pewter hairpins shaped like miniature stilettos, part of a gift set from a Corsican countess. You slide them into the sides of the crown, angled just enough to imply danger, but not enough to poke the Marquis de Louvois in the eye again. Once was enough. And then comes the powder. For her, you use ash gray with a hint of silver, dignified, mysterious, slightly tragic. It softens the lines of her face and adds gravity to her sharp cheekbones. Did you hear? She murmurs, suddenly still. The apprentice barber in the West Wing vanished. Just didn't show up this morning. You nod slowly. That's the second one this month. Leon pretends not to be listening, but his hands tighten on the combs. They say he knew something about the Queen's brother, about letters. You keep working. It's not your job to question, just to style, polish, and preserve the illusion that everything is as it should be. Still, you remember the apprentice, a quiet boy. He once confessed he wanted to open a salon in Marseille, far from politics, perfume, and whispers that come with consequences. And now, no one knows. Versailles swallows people as easily as it powders them. A mainstream fact. The palace maintained a strict hierarchy even among its servants. Barbers sat oddly in the social fabric, above stable boys, below valets, yet intimately tied to the faces of power. This made them both essential and expendable. Some were promoted, others vanished. The profession carried prestige but also danger. Historians still argue whether the court barbers were merely silent witnesses or unofficial agents in the flow of political secrets. You'd argue both. You fasten the final curl into place with a filigree clasp shaped like a rosebud. It softens the violence of the style, making the daggers look almost romantic. Madame d'Eglantine opens her eyes and smiles at her reflection. Yes, this will make them nervous. That's what we aim for, you reply. She tosses a handful of sugared almonds onto the counter. For your trouble, and tell your boy to keep his ears closed. Leon scoops the almonds into a pouch the moment she leaves. Should we be worried? You pause. Yes, but we don't have time for that. Your next client has already arrived. Early. The Comte de Lucerne. A minor noble with a major fear of public opinion. He enters nervously, his wig tucked under one arm like a toddler with separation anxiety. Someone laughed at me, he says, flopping into the chair. Laughed at me. You lean in. Was it a cruel laugh or a pity laugh? Does it matter? It absolutely does, but you don't tell him that. Instead, you assess the wig. It's fine. A little flat, maybe? Slightly yellowed from too much sun and not enough vinegar rinse? Nothing catastrophic. I want volume, he says, but not aggression. I want to say, I matter, but not in a desperate way. Understood, you say, already reaching for the regrettable nephew blend of chestnut and silver tones. You begin curling and pinning, lifting at the crown, drawing volume toward the temples to frame his face in a subtle aura of relevance. Leon brings over a swatch of powder samples. You point to moonstone beige. Yes, the Comte says, nodding. That says, I'm worth talking about. You apply with precision. He whispers, do you think people forget us when we fall out of favor? You meet his eyes in the mirror. Only if we let them see us fade. He nods, suddenly solemn. You finish the style with a flourish, simple, elegant, but undeniably present. He leaves looking taller somehow. You breathe out slowly. The room is quiet for a moment, and then you hear it shouting from the corridor. 2 courtiers locked in a screaming match over, you guessed it, a shared hair appointment time. Leon grabs the broom. You pick up the comb. Another battle begins. You step into the corridor like a general entering enemy territory. Calm, controlled, with a damp powder cloth tucked discreetly into your sleeve. Leon follows close behind, broom held upright like a halberd. The scene? Utter chaos. 2 courtiers, Monsieur de Vauréal and the Vicomte de Sorel, are nose to nose in front of your salon, each red-faced, each gripping their appointment cards like dueling pistols. A small crowd has gathered. Powder hangs in the air like tension made visible. I scheduled this appointment last month, hisses de Vauréal. Your card says the 14th, snaps the Vicomte. Today is the 14th. No, it's the 13th, you puffed up narwhal. Gentlemen, you say, gently but firmly. The schedule shows 1 slot. We could combine appointments? Both men stop. Their expressions shift simultaneously, from outrage to horror. De Vauréal gasps. Share a barber's chair with him? I'd rather powder my scalp with sand. Right. New plan. You tap your chin. We'll settle this in the courtyard. A style off. A few gasps from the onlookers. This is highly irregular. The Earl snorts. A competition. You nod. Whoever emerges most compelling by court standards wins the slot. You'll be judged by an impartial panel. They look at each other, then at the crowd, then back at you. Who's the panel? de Veraldale asks suspiciously. You gesture toward the hallway. 3 available onlookers snap to attention. A chamberlain, a pastry steward, and one of the Queen's lesser-known cousins who hasn't had a full sentence addressed to her since last spring. The men agree. 10 minutes later, the courtyard is alive with action. Leon sets up folding mirrors. You prep 2 styling stations using travel kits and powdered cloths. You instruct the judges to look for balance, originality, and emotional resonance, which makes the pastry steward weep slightly. You begin with de Vauréal. He wants drama, always has. You sculpt his thin hair into a vertical column you name the Imperial Willow, tall, curved slightly at the tip, with ribbon threads that flutter in the breeze. He grins at his reflection. I look like a marble fountain. You nod. Yes, but in a commanding way. Next, the Vicomte. He's subtler, wants mystery. You flatten the crown, create a swooping side curl, and tuck a powdered laurel leaf just above his ear. Think statesman meets ghost, you whisper. When he sees himself, he says, I look like I'm keeping a secret and a kingdom. The crowd claps. You step back, winded. This might be your best work and your worst idea.
The panel deliberates. After a tense moment, they vote 2-1 for the Vicomte.
Devorial is stunned. Fixed! That steward always hated my almond cakes. The pastry steward shrugs. Your frosting is chaotic.
Devorial storms off, muttering about injustice and hair-line conspiracies.
You escort the Vicomte back to the salon for final touches, though there's little left to do. He's still glowing with the high of victory.
As he sits, he says, "Did you know I once fought in a duel over a mispronounced compliment?"
You nod. Sounds familiar.
You wouldn't remember. You were just a basin boy then. You do remember, actually. You handed him his cravat before the duel and watched him lose a bit of his earlobe.
He leans in. Do you think people notice me again?
You finish the last pin and reply, "They will now." He gives you a coin and a wink, then sweeps out like he just inherited Portugal. Leon closes the salon door and collapses onto the bench.
Well, he says, that escalated.
You mop your brow. Let's never do that again.
Then the door creaks open.
It's a valet, pale and shaking. "Queen," he says. "She requests you
Immediately. Your spine stiffens.
When?
Now. She's displeased with her evening look. She says she looks soft.
That's not good.
You gather your best shears, your cleanest powder puff, and your calmest face.
Leon packs a box of emergency ribbons, just in case.
Should I come?
No, you say. If I don't return, burn the wigs. He gives a nervous salute. You walk the long corridor toward the Queen's chambers.
Each step echoes like a countdown.
Because when the Queen says soft, she means war.
A mainstream fact. Marie Antoinette famously influenced and was influenced by the power of image. Her hairstyles, especially those crafted by her famed hairdresser Leonard, were political symbols. The towering poufs often reflected events, naval victories, harvest celebrations, even new pregnancies. And yet, the wrong look could invite ridicule, pamphlets, and public hatred.
Historians still argue whether her fashion choices were bold statements of power or oblivious excess in a time of hunger. You think both, with too much powder. You arrive at her door. A maid ushers you in. The Queen is sitting alone, her reflection scowling back at her. She looks up, sees you, and says, "Fix it." You bow deeply, then slowly, reverently, you reach for the pins.
The Queen doesn't move. She sits like marble, flawless and unyielding as you circle behind her, your heartbeat skipping like a misfiring metronome. Her hair is already styled, of course, by two of her regular ladies-in-waiting and a junior coiffeur from the Swiss court. But it's wrong. You see it instantly. Too much lift in the center. The curls swoop too far left. The ribbon, a shade too pale, disappears in the candlelight. Her face is lost inside the structure instead of crowned by it.
You take a slow breath.
"You've come alone?" she asks, without turning her head.
"I prefer to work without an audience, Your Majesty."
"Good. So do I." You meet her eyes in the mirror, just once, before bowing slightly and beginning. No words, no small talk. This isn't an appointment. It's a rescue. You begin carefully, like a thief disarming a trap. First, you unpin the sides, gently peeling away layers of stiffened curls. The queen's real hair beneath is thick, coiled, and slightly damp from the warm room and her simmering frustration. I said I wanted to look formidable, she mutters, not like a debutante swaddled in macarons. You don't smile, but inside, you understand. This is a woman raised for ceremony, thrown into theater, and now surviving in a palace built on projections. Her power is partly real, but mostly constructed, and you're one of the builders. You hum softly as you lift the strands and sweep them back, not too tight, not too loose. You're sculpting her image, the most dangerous sculpture in France. For this you use your sharpest comb, the one made from whalebone, gifted by an admiral after you saved his wife's wig from a dog attack. The teeth are fine and unforgiving, perfect for clean lines and difficult situations. You tighten the crown just slightly, then begin layering low curls around the ears. They draw the eye upward and make her cheekbones look like daggers. She closes her eyes. You could cut her hair short right now and no one would stop you. But you don't, because this isn't about your power, it's about hers. Or rather, the illusion of it, strength, poise, absolute control. You dust her scalp with a custom powder blend, your own invention, dove gray and lilac, with just a whisper of crushed shell to catch the light. You call it smoke and steel. She inhales faintly. This is the only time, she says, I feel like I own the room. Pause. She's not wrong. A mainstream fact. Marie Antoinette's hair, styled into elaborate constructions known as poufs, often carried coded messages. In one infamous case, she wore a ship-shaped wig to celebrate a naval victory, complete with tiny sails and a painted figurehead. The court adored it. The public, not so much. Historians still debate whether she understood the backlash she courted with these extravagant displays, or whether she believed, perhaps desperately, that her appearance was her influence. In a court where decisions were whispered, not decreed, visibility meant everything. You place the final comb, enameled silver, shaped like a flame, into the center of her crown. There it is. The transformation, not just of hair, but of posture, expression, presence. The queen in the mirror is not amused, or radiant, or soft. She is a weapon. Better, she says. You nod. The room will remember you. Chatons, she smiles faintly. They always do, but not always kindly. You step back, careful not to exhale too loudly. The chambermaid re-enters, face unreadable. She holds out a velvet pouch. The queen shakes her head. No payment, not today. You blink. The queen turns to you. But you will receive a favor. One you may claim when the time is right. Your throat tighten. Thank you, Majesty. And just like that, it's over. You pack up your tools and bow again, this time deeper. As you exit, Leon is waiting in the corridor, his eyes wide. You're alive, he whispers. That's unexpected. She was pleased, you say,
Stunned, he hands you a cloth to wipe your hands. You smell like confidence and anxiety. You don't disagree. Back at the salon, the evening appointments have thinned. A few footmen want trims. A harpsichordist is asleep on the bench, snoring into his music sheets. Leon begins sweeping quietly. The powder piles up like snowfall. Glance at your hands, still shaking, still steady. Because in the end, you're more than a barber. You're a mirror, a confidant, a conspirator in confidence. And tomorrow, it all begins again. Night has begun to unfurl its velvet across Versailles. Candles flicker like gossip, soft, erratic, and dangerous. The salons are quieter now, though the echoes of clinking glasses and distant laughter still drift through the corridors. Somewhere the mask has begun. Perfumed masks, powdered tempers, and silken lies swirl through the marble halls. But you're heading in the opposite direction. Down a narrow stairwell behind the east gallery. The stone steps are damp, the torchlight dim. Leon trails behind you carrying a sealed leather case containing your sharpest blades, smallest scissors, and one perfectly honed straight razor. Because tonight, your hands are needed not in the glittering salons, but in a private room tucked beneath the palace, where swords are drawn as often as invitations. You knock twice. A narrow slit in the door opens. It's him, someone murmurs. The latch clicks. The door creaks open. Inside is a man you've styled before, though never under these circumstances. The Chevalier de l'Estang, handsome, deadly, and currently bleeding from a slice across his left cheekbone. I need your hand, he says simply. Not for curls. You set down your case and open it silently. This isn't your first midnight duel cleanup. You've bandaged sliced ears, stitched split scalps, and once delicately restyled a ponytail on a man who had just run a sword through his brother-in-law. Because courtly violence comes dressed in silks. But it still bleeds. The Chevalier pulls off his coat and sits in the rickety chair. You tilt his chin gently toward the candlelight. The cut isn't deep, but it's angry. What happened? You ask softly. He winces as you dab the wound with clove-soaked linen. Disagreement over inheritance and a woman. Possibly both. Sounds expensive. He smirks. You reach for the needle. A fringe tidbit. Court barbers were often called upon to perform minor surgeries, tooth pulling and bloodletting. The boundary between barber and surgeon was blurry well into the 18th century. In fact, the traditional red and white barber pole comes from this very heritage. Red for blood, white for bandages. You've often thought your pole should be lavender and gray. More accurate. Leon prepares the balm while you stitch. The Chevalier doesn't flinch. I heard about your rescue, he murmurs. The Queen. You pause. I was only asked to fix the powder. Then why did she look ready to invade Spain afterward? You say nothing. But inside, you feel it again. That strange electricity in your fingertips when power flows through hair, through presence, through the tiny illusion that something, anything, is under control. You finish the last stitch and begin trimming around it with a tiny pair of golden scissors. He catches your wrist. Careful, I'm still planning to be handsome. Then stop getting stabbed, he chuckles. You wrap the wound, then brush the powder off his collar. You'll need a proper wash tomorrow, but for now, he'll pass. Can I trust you? He asks suddenly. You look him in the eye. No, you say,
But I'm discreet. He nods once and pulls a letter from his boot, sealed in green wax. Deliver this to the perfumer at the Rue des Violettes. No one else.
You hesitate. That perfumer has ties to the Girondins, revolutionaries who dream of bringing the whole powdered world crashing down.
You're asking a barber to be a messenger.
He smiles faintly. You're not just a barber. You pocket the letter without another word. As you pack your tools, Leon pulls you aside. Are we spies now?
You sigh. We've always been spies. We just wear aprons instead of cloaks. You leave the chamber quietly. Outside, the gardens hum with masked laughter, as if nothing is changing, but you can feel it. The air is different tonight, like powder refusing to settle. Pass a hallway where two noblemen are arguing over whose reflection is more flattering in a convex mirror. Nearby, a woman sobs into her gloves over a lost earring. A valet scurries by with a tray of swan-shaped pastries, Versailles in all its glittering absurdity. But you don't stop. You return to the salon, back to your tools, your brushes, your fragile kingdom, because tomorrow you'll do it all again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be ready when it all comes undone. You're back at the salon before dawn, the halls still hushed and cloaked in the breath of candle smoke and fading perfume. Leon is asleep on the bench, a powdered wig clutched like a teddy bear under his arm. You don't wake him, not yet. Instead, you light a single lamp, set down your sealed letter from the Chevalier, and pour yourself a bowl of warm water. Your fingers ache. The back of your neck is stiff. There's a fleck of powder on your lip that tastes faintly of violets and danger. You rinse your hands and stare into the mirror. There you are, face sallow, eyes red-rimmed, powder settled into the lines like dust in the cracks of a marble statue. And yet, your hands still work. Your tools are still sharp. The schedule is already filling again. You lean against the counter, watching the reflection of the sun beginning to paint the outer walls in faint gold. This place is still standing. For now. Your first client arrives early. It's a boy, 16, maybe 17, nervous, thin, trying to wear confidence like it fits. He's new to court, you can tell. He's trying too hard to look like he isn't. My uncle says I should make an impression, he says, but not an opinion. Do you understand? Perfectly. Gesture toward the chair. Let's make you look like a young man who knows exactly when to shut up. He laughs a little, relieved. As you begin combing his hair, you notice the clumsy way it's been hacked at previously, probably by a village barber, or worse, a family servant with sharp instincts and dull tools. You'll have to rebuild it, but that's what you do. You rebuild people, one snip at a time. Leon stirs awake, groaning dramatically as he sits up. Did I die? No, you reply. But you drooled on the Duchess of Fronssac's Monday wig. He lifts the wig. She'll never notice. She drools more than I do. You smile and return to the boy in the chair. You use a mid-length style, not too daring, not too dull. Volume at the back, just a hint of softness at the fringe. You call it l'innocence calculée, calculated innocence. The powder is pale blonde with a whisper of mint, subtle, refreshing, not trying too hard. He looks at himself and whispers,
I look like someone with an inheritance.
You nod. Just don't say that out loud. He pays in clean coin and walks out standing straighter. Leon watches him go.
You think he'll survive?
Probably, you say.
Long enough to make some mistakes.
The next appointment is already knocking. It's the Duchess of St. Auban. She always wants something new, even if she can't define it. Last time she asked for something like the wind, but with regrets. You gave her a bad raid that looked like a sigh.
Today she asks for tension and vulnerability.
You go with a high twist that folds back into itself, soft at the temples, sharp at the nape. She squeals. It's perfect, like I've been crying, but with elegance. Exactly. You glance at the appointment list. There are 15 names today, each with a crisis, each with expectations, each with a secret they'll almost, but not quite, confess, while you run your fingers through their hair. A mainstream fact. In many noble households, the barber knew more than the priest. Confessions made under the hum of powder and combs were considered safer, less judgmental, more practical. Who needs absolution when you can get discretion with a curl? You hear a crash in the corridor, a tray of glass perfume vials from the sound of it. A footman appears in the doorway. There's been an incident, he says out of breath. You glance at Leon. What kind? The Comte de Tamouille, the footman says. He challenged someone. They say it was about a ribbon. The Comte de... Of course it was. You grab the travel case. Come on, you say to Leon. Do I need gloves? Probably. And the vinegar cloth. He groans. I liked it better when our job was hair. You shake your head. It never was. And off you go, once more into the powdered fray. The Comte de Tremouille is seated on a velvet ottoman in the antechamber of the south ballroom, one hand pressed firmly against the side of his face, and the other waving away two concerned valets. I'm fine, he growls, though the blood soaking through his lace cuff disagrees. As you approach, you see the damage. A neat slice just below the cheekbone, dangerously close to the smile line. That ribbon he was dueling over, still clutched in his other hand, crimson silk, now stained a darker shade. Leon sets down the travel case, already prepping gauze and lavender salve. Who was it this time? You ask as you kneel beside the ottoman. The Comte doesn't look at you. He was wearing citron, in October. Unforgivable, you murmur, dabbing gently at the wound. This is your third ribbon-related injury this season. You're beginning to consider creating a separate treatment menu. Ribbon wrath recovery, complete with balm, mirror reassessment, and conflict debriefing. You clean the cut carefully, making sure not to disturb the edge of his hairline. It's been recently styled badly. The sides are uneven, the powder caked into clumps. You suppress a sigh. Did he insult your hair too, you ask, reaching for your shears? Indirectly. The Comte mutters. He said my style was derivative. A sharp intake of breath from Leon. Not derivative. That's worse than treason. You adjust his collar, lift a lock of damp hair, and begin snipping. Not enough for transformation, just enough for subtle rebalance. A soft ridge here, a lift there. You blur the shame of the scuffle with angles that imply strength. You look composed, you say, as though you never swung a candlestick at anyone. He smiles, winces. Thank you. You nod. But you'll need to avoid mirrors for at least a day, and possibly yellow.
He groans. Once you've patched, powdered, and restored dignity, he stands. They'll say I lost. You glance at the ribbon still clutched in his hand. Then let them. He leaves with his head high and his wound well disguised. You pack up quickly. More guests are arriving for the late dinner seating, and several of them are already eyeing you with unspoken requests. You shake your head. Appointments only. Leon mutters, we should charge double for blood. Back in the salon, the evening crowd trickles in. First, a harpsichordist with a receding hairline and a full-length poem he wants read aloud as you style. Then, a pair of noble twins who insist on being identical, down to the precise angle of each curl. You measure with a caliper. Then, worse than a duel, worse than a poem, the Dauphin's tutor. He enters with a sigh so heavy it wilts the hydrangeas on Leon's display tray. I need a style that says deep regret, he says. Collapsing into the chair, you tilt your head. What happened? I used the wrong Latin conjugation at dinner. The king corrected me. Twice. A scholarly faux pas. Fatal. You begin combing, opting for a low-volume silhouette with a smooth finish. You don't want to draw attention to the ears or the back of the neck, both vulnerable spots when shame is involved. You use a sage-scented oil, calming and restorative. No powder this time. You let the natural hair speak. Wisdom, humility, a hint of bookish redemption. A mainstream fact. Subtlety in hairstyle was once considered the pinnacle of courtly maturity. Too much flair suggested insecurity. Tutors, advisors, and poets often lean toward understated finishes with muted scents like thyme, bergamot, or occasionally paper ash. Yes, from books. The idea was to smell thoughtful. Leon whispers, should I find the Latin phrase for oops? You shake your head. The tutor stands, examines his reflection, and exhales. I look forgivable. You nod. Only just. The night rolls on. Appointments blur. Powder thickens. Leon falls asleep with a ribbon roll in one hand and a brush in the other. You step outside for a moment. Just a breath. Courtyard is quiet. Stars scatter across the ink-blue sky. You sit on the edge of the fountain and finally unfold the letter you've been carrying since the duel room call 2 nights ago. Green wax, still unbroken. You turn it over. Chevalier's seal. But no name, no address. Only a single phrase scribbled on the back. Deliver only if they fall. You stare at it. Versailles is still standing. Just barely. But the cracks are showing. Leon appears in the doorway, yawning. The Duchesse de Montresor is here. Says she's feeling emotionally asymmetrical. Of course she is. You pocket the letter again, rise slowly, and head back inside. Because your job is not to speculate. Your job is to style, to soothe, to sculpt the illusion that everything, somehow, is still beautiful. The Duchesse de Montresor perches in your chair like a porcelain bird on the edge of a gilded cage. Eyes glassy, with the kind of sadness only aristocrats can afford. She doesn't speak at first, just lifts her chin slightly, exposing her long neck, a swan in mourning. You wait. I've been told, she finally says,
that I smiled too widely at the Comte de Neuville. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. Court etiquette strikes again. Smiling too widely is tantamount to flirting. Not smiling at all is coldness. Smiling the right amount, rare, dangerous, treasured. And what do you think? You ask gently.
She considers. I think I want to look unbothered, but not heartless. Maybe with a touch of remorse. Nothing obvious, just layered.
Ah, yes, the emotional equivalent of a croissant. You nod. Leon brings over your mood board ribbons. Yes, you have a ribbon system based on emotional subtext. You select one in soft coral satin and another in dusky mauve. Layered together, they'll whisper delicacy with a hint of resistance. Perfect. You start with a gentle comb through, then pin sections back from her face, letting a few curls fall deliberately, styled to look accidental, of course. You create a half updo anchored with twisted knots at the crown, each one softening her expression without muting it. She must appear as though her thoughts are deep but not dark, mysterious, not melancholic, present but unavailable. While you work, she whispers, "Do you think he'll notice me at the ball tonight?" You don't answer directly. Instead, you say, "He'll notice that everyone else is noticing you." She smiles just enough. This is what you do. You craft narratives with hair, every strand a sentence, every curl a clause. A style is never just decorative. It's a story, sometimes a threat, a mainstream fact. Versailles functioned not just as a palace, but as an open stage, its residents actors in a never-ending production of hierarchy, seduction, and power. Hair was one of the most visible markers of current standing. A subtle change in height or tone could send ripples across entire salons. Historians still debate whether the hair dictated the politics or the politics dictated the hair.
You'd say it depends on who's holding the comb.
You dust her final curls with pearl powder laced with chamomile, soothing, slightly luminous. She inhales, visibly calmer. This is exactly right, she breathes.
You nod, and entirely deniable. She leaves without another word.
But the glint in her eye says everything.
Leon begins sweeping again. That's 12 appointments since sunrise. You want tea? Tea and silence. He disappears into the back room. You take the moment to breathe, rolling your wrists gently, letting the stiffness fall away.
But your quiet doesn't last.
Another knock.
This one is hesitant, nervous. A shadow crosses the threshold, young, cloaked, and unfamiliar. Is this the court salon? You rise slowly. It is. The figure steps inside, lowering her hood. A girl, 17, maybe 18, a servant's daughter by the look of her dress, but wearing her hair half pinned in the style of a novice noble. Amateurishly done. I'm to be presented tomorrow, she says. But my mother died before she could show me how to do any of this. You swallow. Come, you say gently. Let's make them see you.
She sits stiffly in the chair. You approach with the lightest touch, careful not to startle. You begin by undoing the awkward knots and brushing out the tangles. Her hair is thick, untrained, full of potential.
Leon returns with tea, sees her, and instantly softens. He pours quietly, sets it down.
As you work, you guide her through the basics: how to part for symmetry, how to powder without clumping, how to anchor pins without stabbing your scalp. She listens intently, eyes wide. You build a simple style: curls near the temples, soft volume in the back, and a single braid coiled just beneath the crown. Modest, elegant, and unmistakably intentional. You choose a pale blush powder and a narrow ribbon. Nothing grand, just enough to whisper, "I belong here." She stares at herself in the mirror and presses her lips together. Then, so softly, "Thank you." You nod. "Come back the morning of your presentation. I'll make sure they remember." She reaches into her sleeve and offers you a single copper coin, the only one she has. You take it, tuck it into your vest pocket, and say, "Then this is the most valuable payment I've received all year." She leaves a different person. You sit down. Finally, Leon pours your tea. Again. "Busy today," he says. "They always are," you murmur. There's a pause. Then Leon asks, "Do you ever wonder what you'd be doing if you hadn't ended up here?" You sip your tea. "I'd probably be on a street corner with a broken comb offering curls for bread." "See said." He laughs. "But you're only half joking." You glance at the green sealed letter again. It's still in your pocket, still unopened, still waiting. Outside, bells begin to chime. The mask is ending. And you're still here. Still styling, still listening, still surviving. The bells continue their slow, deliberate toll as you extinguish the final lamp in the front salon. Shadows stretch across the floor, long and soft. Leon's already curled on the bench, one boot off, a curl paper stuck to his cheek. He mumbles something about soup in his sleep. You don't have the heart to wake him. Instead, you drift toward the back room, the tiny alcove where you keep your private blends, your contraband tools, and now a letter with a green wax seal. You pull it from your pocket once more, weighing it in your palm. Not just for its contents, but for what it means. That the Comte de l'Estang, bleeding in a back room 2 nights ago, thought you trustworthy enough to carry his secrets, or expendable enough to deliver them. Either way, the letter hasn't left your person since, but you still haven't opened. Not yet. You tuck it beneath a stack of folded towels deep in the back cabinet. You'll know when the time is right. And when you return to the main salon, someone is waiting for you. You didn't hear the door. She stands there, still as a statue in mourning, pale blue gown, hair unpowdered, face calm, but her eyes are storm clouds. You recognize her. Everyone does. The Marquise de Liniers, rarely seen. Rumored to be one of the Queen's oldest friends, a ghost of old power, drifting through court only when things are about to change. "I've come," she says, "for something simple." That alone tells you everything. No noble asks for simplicity unless something is about to break. You gesture to the chair. She sits. You don't ask questions. You just begin. Her hair's untouched, natural, heavy, clean. That's rare. That means she's preparing for something. A confrontation, a confession, an escape. You lift it, twist it into an elegant coil at the nape of her neck, leaving a few tendrils free by her ears. Nothing too polished, nothing too defensive. You powder lightly, only at the roots. Pale gray, with a whisper of lilac. She watches herself, and then softly, "You've heard the rumors." You pause. I try not to. That the queen will flee, that there's a plan, that this place, this powder-drenched stage will collapse. You resume pinning. "They're only rumors," you say gently. She exhales through her nose, and yet here I am, requesting the kind of hairstyle that fits under a cloak. You nod. "I can make it very travel-friendly." She gives you a sad smile. "I remember when you were just the boy who polished brushes for your uncle. Now everyone trusts you more than their own families." You don't know what to say to that, so you don't say anything. You fasten her final curl into place. Pin it with a silver clasp shaped like a swallow. Freedom. Flight. You don't say that either. She stands. She doesn't look in the mirror again. As she reaches the door, she turns. "If you get a letter from anyone important, burn it or use it, but don't hold on to it too long." Then she's gone, and the room is quiet again until Leon stirs and mutters, "Are we at war yet?" "Not officially. Give it a week. And then that means you don't disagree." In the morning, your first client arrives before sunrise. The maître d'hôtel, he wants his sideburns evened out before the ambassadors arrive. You trim in silence while he lectures on the decline of civility. Next, a bishop with powder allergies. You use rice starch instead. He sneezes anyway. Then 2 guardsmen, a seamstress with coins she shouldn't have, and a boy delivering pastries who asks for a hero's parting. That last one sticks with you. You give him a style called le dernier regard, the last look, just in case. As the day stretches on, word spreads.
There's been unrest in Paris. Another bakery smashed, soldiers reassigned. Rumors swirl that someone at court has disappeared. Again.
Leon listens at every doorway. You pretend not to notice. But when no one's looking, you open the cabinet and take out the letter. Because the time is coming. And you'll need to choose scissors or smoke. The green seal breaks with a faint crack. Inside the envelope, a folded parchment. Clean, undecorated, creased neatly. The handwriting is sharp, deliberate, and without flourish, like a blade disguised as ink. You read it once, then again. The message is short. No names, no places, just a single instruction. Deliver the enclosed to the perfumer on the Rue des Violettes before the 21st. Do not be followed. Do not return the way you came. Beneath it, tucked carefully into the fold, is a second paper, smaller, silk-thin, almost translucent. Not written in French, not written in any court script you recognize, just a coded string of symbols. Cipher. Encrypted. Which means it's not perfume being delivered. You set the pages down carefully and press your palms against the counter. If this letter is what you think it is, you've now stepped out of the powder and straight into the fire. You glance at Leon. He's scrubbing a comb with a wire brush, humming some ridiculous court tune about pears and betrayal. He catches your eye. "What?" he says. "Nothing. Not yet." You fold the pages back into the envelope, seal it with wax, and slide it into the lining of your powder case. For now, you'll carry it like everything else, quietly, invisibly, beneath the curls. You get back to work, because appearances, as always, must be maintained. Your next appointment is, of all people, the king's falconer. a leathery man with hawk scars on both arms and a hairline that recedes like the tide. Don't bother with powder, he grunts as he drops into your chair. Birds hate it. You nod. Any style requests?
Something that won't frighten the prey. Practical.
You go short at the sides, leave the top just long enough to suggest intention. Scent it with cedarwood and clove. For the first time today, your hands move without tension. He leaves with a grunt and a coin heavy enough to make your sleeve sag. Then comes a valet. Then a playwright. Then a woman you've never seen before who insists you style her just like the queen, even though her hair is thin, brittle, and fraying like old lace. You do it anyway, 'cause no one needs your honesty. They need your art. As night falls, the salons begin to quiet. Only one name remains on your appointment book. Madame Celestine de Robecourt. You haven't seen her in months. She arrives without announcement, wearing mourning black and no wig at all. Her real hair, a cascade of white and silver, is unstyled, untouched, cascading loose around her shoulders like a cathedral veil. You're the only one I trust, she says softly. You nod and guide her to the chair. I want something new, she says. Something that says, I've buried what I needed to bury, and I've remembered who I am. That's a tall order. But you've done worse. You run your hands through her hair, mapping its length, its weight, its memories. You start with a clean part, centered, strong. You draw the hair back slowly, folding it into a low knot, leaving the front smooth, the edges soft, no powder, no ornamentation. You finish it with a single strand, wrapped like a ribbon across the base. A self-contained style, a closed circle. She sees herself in the mirror and for a long time says nothing. Then, that's exactly it. Pays you with a kiss to the cheek and a whispered warning. They're watching the bridges now. All of them. You nod. You already knew. But it's different, hearing it out loud. After she leaves, you lock the salon door and sit at your bench. Leon approaches, hesitant. You're leaving, aren't you? You look at him, this boy who used to smell like chalk dust and sugar paste, now streaked with flour, balm, and secrets. I have to deliver something, you say quietly. I'll come. No, you say. You'll stay. Keep the salon warm. Someone has to. In clothes. He nods. Just once. Then hands you your oldest comb. The one with the chipped edge. The one you've kept since your first street cut. For luck, he says. You smile and slip it into your coat. The perfumer on Rue des Violettes is 23 turns and 5 excuses away. You'll need a cloak, a quiet walk, a convincing lie. But you'll go. Because now you know, your hands don't just craft illusions. They carry truth. And tonight, that truth is dangerous. You leave before dawn, wrapped in a borrowed cloak and silence. Their sigh behind you doesn't sleep. It simmers. The courtyards glow faintly with torchlight. The stone walls whisper with gossip, and powdered dreams begin to curdle into dread. You don't look back. The letter is tucked beneath your shirt, close enough to feel its shape against your chest. The little comb Leon gave you, your first tool, your talisman, rests in your coat pocket. Your shears remain in their velvet pouch, though for the first time in years they feel less like instruments of beauty and more like a kind of blade you might have to use in self-defense. You take the long way around, down the narrow path past the disused stables, through a garden overgrown with thorned vines where no one trims anymore, across the dry fountain square where someone once fainted from too much starch and too little food. There's a boy posted at the second gate, young, shivering. When he asks your name, you give him a false one. When he asks your trade, you say, chemist. His eyes glaze. He lets you pass. Versailles might be falling, but its bureaucracy hasn't noticed yet. The Rue des Violettes is still asleep when you arrive. The perfumery is a simple storefront, no nameplate, just an iron violet embossed into the doorframe. You knock twice, then once, then again. Exactly as instructed. The door creaks open. No words. A figure in a nightrobe takes the envelope without looking at you, nods once and vanishes. You don't wait to be thanked. You don't ask what was in the ciphered note. You just walk away, keeping your eyes on the road, your hands in your sleeves, and your breath tight inside your ribs. By the time you return to the outskirts of Versailles, the sun is up. Bells ring for mass. Somewhere in the palace, powdered heads are being dressed and puffed and plated. The world continues teetering beautifully. You slip back into the salon through the back entrance. Leon is awake, his hair a mess, apron already tied. You did it? He asks. You nod. No trouble? You shrug. Not yet. He exhales, relieved. Then, your 9 o'clock is early. The Duchess wants something inspired by fog. Of course she does. You take your coat off, wash your hands, reopen the mirror shutters. You notice something different in your reflection. An edge, a weight, something sharpened overnight. Then you get back to work. Because the palace hasn't fallen yet. Because hair must still be styled. Because until they drag the last powdered head to the guillotine, someone has to make the nobility look like they deserve to survive. And maybe, just maybe, that someone is you. Now, my friend, let's draw the curtain slowly. You've made it through fire, feathers, poison, and powder, through gossip sharper than razors, and mornings that came too early for hands already tired. You stood where others trembled. You sheared pride. You stitched reputation. You coaxed illusions into curls and powdered them gently with the finest lies Versailles had to offer. And you survived. But let's not rush away just yet. Stay with me just a moment longer. Let the glow of candlelight fade behind your eyes. Let the hum of salons and silks dissolve into the quiet of breath and stillness. You don't need to hold your posture anymore. You don't have to smile for mirrors or bow to vanity. You're not the barber now. You're just resting. Imagine warm hands rinsing powder from your face. A comb laid to rest beside still water. The scent of bergamot and lavender, not sharp, but soft. Like memory, like something you once carried and have now finally put down. Whatever tomorrow brings, be it fashion or fury or the fall of crowns, you'll meet it with clean hands, steady breath, and the grace only someone who's seen behind the wigs can understand. So breathe in.
Let go. And let your dreams take you somewhere quiet, where no one's watching and nothing needs to be perfect. You've earned that.
Sweet dreams.